This video is showing you guys the process of preparing material to be used for really any project. This project specifically that I'm working on is a table. So first what I did was, which I didn't record, was taking a board of white oak out of the drying rack. I cut it into 22-inch sections because the maximum length pieces I'm going to need is about 20 inches. I leave a little bit of wiggle room on either side just to make sure that I can then go back and make the ends actually be straight. So now what I'll be doing is I'm going to be ripping these or cutting them along the length of the grain into 1-inch pieces because these boards are about 1 inch thick and I need square pieces. So there's a few things I checked before doing this. I had to check that the blade was above the height of the material, check that the fence is actually at 1 inch, check that I have a push stick nearby, and then as I'm running it through, to keep my fingers away from the blade, I'm going to actually use that push stick to finish pushing the material all the way through. Even though the saw stop comes with a brake that should trigger if you contact it, you don't want to get in the habit of not only relying on that, but you don't want to constantly be triggering the brake because that will quickly add up costs and not be an efficient way to work. With this last piece, I went to cut it and I realized it had a bit of a wobble to it. So I put it back down on the table and I see it rocks pretty significantly. What's going on is the end of the board kind of hooks a bit, so it doesn't sit flat. So eventually what I'll do is I'll go back, I'll cross cut that a little shorter to get rid of that hook, and then come back here to rip that material. So I'm going to keep ripping through material, and then I'll come back on the next step. Okay, so now that I'm done ripping all the material into 1 by 1 strips, I'm going to come over to the joiner. Before I can actually do anything on the joiner, I need to figure out which side needs to be jointed first. What the joiner will do is it has blades that are underneath the table, and it will level out one side, whatever side it is that's running along the table. So you want to make sure that the piece you're running through isn't going to rock back and forth. So if there's any kind of cupping, you want the side that has the ends of the board contacting the table to be down. That will prevent it from rocking back and forth as you go. So here what I'm doing is piling them all up in the order I'm going to run them with the good side down. This piece right here, you can see this has a pretty extreme cup. So where I'm pointing to, I'm going to draw a line and I will cross cut that piece off just to get rid of that piece so there's less material I have to deal with when I'm trying to level this out. Theoretically, I could have left it and just kept jointing it down, but I'm going to lose so much material to actually get it flush that it's just worth making it a little shorter. So on the joiner, the first pass through is putting that bottom face that I lined up for all the pieces, pushing that across, and then testing to see if it's perfectly flat. Once it's perfectly flat, I will then put a couple check marks on it with a pencil to mark to say that this side is done, so I know that that is now a reference face, meaning I can use that to reference off of when I use other machines. So most of these pieces take 1 or 2 passes on the first side to get them flush because they were pretty decent to start with because they all came off the table saw. So here you'll see I'm putting my check marks. I put 2 on each piece just in case for whatever reason maybe one got scratched off or something. Having a second one doesn't really hurt. Once those are done, then I flip it on its side and I repeat the process. I'm trying to figure out, does this piece rock? What's the best way to run it? Once I determine that, I'm going to run it through again, this time keeping the side that I had just jointed against the fence. That way it can register and make a perfect 90-degree angle. When I'm done, I should have one corner that is perfectly square. And then I'll use this in the next machine to get the thicknesses to be what I need them to be, which is 3/4 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch. As I was recording, I did realize that this angle was not the greatest, so in a little bit I switch up the angle to give you a different perspective of what's going on. But from this angle, you can see the different things I'm doing about tapping the material against the table to make sure everything is flat, keeping it against the fence in certain cuts. So I thought it would still be helpful for you guys to see. So this is one piece that is fully done on the joiner. It had check marks on both sides. Again, that's just like a record keeping. It lets me know that that piece is done on two sides. Use those two sides as the down sides whenever I use another machine. Here what I'm showing you guys is this is quarter sawn white oak, so it has these really nice reflective rays in it. It's one of the distinguishing features about quarter sawn oak. There's a few different species of wood that do this, but it's a really nice feature that when you're done and you finish it, when it catches the light at certain angles, it looks really, really nice. So it's a desirable trait to have. So like I said, after recording for a little bit, I checked the camera and realized that my body was just kind of blocking what I was doing. So this is the same machine. This is a joiner. We're just down at the outfeed end, which is the output end of the table. I figured I would give you a different perspective. Maybe you could see a little bit clearer what's going on. That's really all that this is. This is more of the same process that I was just doing, rocking the pieces back and forth, figuring out which side is flat, which side to run first, all that. And then I was running all these pieces through. I believe there was a total of 19 or 20 pieces that each needed to be jointed on two sides. So it did take quite a while to do this all, but this is all the prep work that goes into any kind of woodworking project. Most of the material that you would get at school, we buy surfaced four sides, which means it comes having already gone through this process. But in a production world, you're going to buy all your material rough sawn, which means it's gone through a bandsaw or a table saw, some kind of milling machine, and it's gotten it to a rough thickness, it's gotten it to a rough width, and that's it. You can see all the tool marks. They use gigantic blades, so there's really nasty looking tool marks on there. Everything is super rough. You need to go through this step to prepare your wood for it to be clean and flat. This phase right here, this is the thickness planer. The machine's really big, so there was no really good way to kind of show you what's going on, but you do need to see what's going on here. Because this is, what I'm doing here is I'm taking those reference faces that I just made on the joiner, and I'm keeping those flat against the table, running them through, and then there are blades above the wood that are going to be shaving the material down. They're cutting the thickness down. So here you can see this is the rough sawn that I'm talking about. The check marks are the good sides, and this dirty side right there, that is what a rough sawn piece of wood looks like. In all honesty, that's not even that bad looking. Some of them are pretty gnarly. But by the time I'm done with this, I'm going to have all my pieces are 3/4 thick, 3/4 wide, and whatever length they are. They're going to be all the same thicknesses and widths. That way I can go on to the next step. So again, while this process isn't that exciting to watch, it's one of those that is very critical to the preparation of any of your material. You're going to do this before any project you do, no matter what it is you're doing. Alright, so now I'm all done thicknessing all of my material. So again, you can get a nice clear view of those medullary rays. Those are those reflective strips that are in the wood. That's, again, a very distinct feature of quarter sawn white oak. And here's just, I'm holding them up so you can get a better look. Everything is perfectly straight now. The opposite side, two of the opposite sides are the ones where you'll see those rays. The other two sides would be considered plain sawn. The grain runs very straight. And now that I have this, now I can actually go start cutting things to length because I have square faces, I have square corners, I know everything is straight. So the last thing I'm going to do in this video is cross-cut the material to length. Before I can go start cutting any of the joinery, I've got to get the specific pieces down to the lengths they need to be. It doesn't make sense to cut the joinery and then realize this leg wasn't supposed to be 20 inches, it was supposed to be 15. Because then you're going to have to cut off the joinery on one of the ends and do it again. So you're always got to make sure you cut the lengths before you do the joinery.